Between 1970 and 1975, 4 women vanished from Hamburg's red light district. They shared the same tragic story: poverty, addiction, survival through sex work, and nights spent at a bar called the Golden Glove. In 1971, one of them resurfaced, but not alive. An Australian worker stumbled upon a suspicious pile of trash. Upon closer inspection, he noticed a human hand sticking out. Police later confirmed the presence of human remains. At the time, they recovered several body parts, everything except the torso and the right leg. Despite the advanced state of decomposition, the head was eventually identified as belonging to Gertrude Breuer, a 42-year-old woman who worked as a hairdresser by day and a sex worker by night. She had been known to offer her services at the Golden Glove bar. The rest of her body wouldn't be discovered until 4 years later. In July 1975, firefighters were called to respond to a blaze at a residential building in St. Pauli. But when they finally made it through the smoke, what they found wasn't the cause of the fire. It was something far more disturbing. The body of a woman was found inside one of the apartments, followed by a second, but when a third was discovered, it became clear something was seriously wrong. The state of the bodies didn't match injuries typically caused by a fire. Something or someone had done this. As officers investigated the gruesome scene, the apartment's tenant unexpectedly arrived. A short man in a security guard uniform who walked through the crime scene tape as if it weren't there. An officer stopped him. He identified himself as Fritz Honka. The detective immediately asked if anyone else lived with him. He said no, claiming he was the only one with access to the apartment, making himself the sole suspect. He was arrested on the spot. At first, Fritz didn't even seem to realize that the bodies had been discovered. He may have only learned that detail after being placed in the police car. It seemed obvious who was responsible for the horrific scene. But to truly understand what had been happening inside that apartment for the past 4 years, investigators had to learn more about the man behind the crimes. Friedrich Paul Honka, known simply as Fritz, was born on July 31, 1935, in Leipzig, Germany. His father, a concentration camp survivor, returned home a broken man, violent, sick, and alcoholic. By age 11, Fritz and his brothers were abandoned by his mother and orphaned after his father died. Smaller and more timid than other kids his age and struggling to socialize, Fritz became a constant target of bullying and physical abuse. While none of these traumas can ever justify the brutalities he would commit in the future, they provide important background on the development of his disturbed mind. In his 20s, a devastating car crash left him with a deformed nose and a misaligned eye. By the time he moved to Hamburg, he was already a broken man, and soon he'd start breaking others. At 22, despite his struggles, Fritz married a woman named Inge, and together they had a son, also named Fritz. Both of them struggled heavily with alcoholism. By the time Fritz was 32, after years of constant drinking and fights, Inge left him, which pushed him even further into drinking and into some dangerously dark thoughts. Fritz rented a small apartment at 74 Zeissstrasse in Hamburg, close to the city's red light district. From that point on, he spent most of his time in the bars of St. Pauli. One of the most well-known was the Golden Glove, named after its owner, a famous boxer. Another bar, the Elb Schloss Keller, was a grim hangout for the homeless and marginalized. These bars wouldn't just be a place to drink, they would become his hunting grounds. After his marriage ended, he attempted to date again, but was unsuccessful. Humiliated by repeated failures, he abandoned relationships and turned to prostitutes. With no friends, socially isolated, and paying for intimacy, not even money spared him from humiliation. Eventually, he started crossing the street to the other bar, seeking out older, homeless women with no future. He offered them alcohol, money, and a place to sleep in exchange for sex. This became his way to fill the emptiness of his apartment. For years, he exploited women forced into extreme survival situations, surrounded by bottles that were never empty. This victim profile, socially invisible women with little to no familial ties, is tragically common among serial killers. Their disappearances are rarely noticed or reported. Some of the women who entered Fritz's apartment were never seen leaving. All that horror came to an end on July 17, 1975, when the Hamburg Fire Department responded to a call at 74 Zeissstrasse in the Ottensen neighborhood. As firefighters controlled the blaze, they quickly realized the fire wasn't the only problem. They found something else. Something far worse. Hidden among the rubble were human remains, multiple bodies, and the condition of those bodies made it clear this was no accident. During the investigation, a mummified body was discovered inside the apartment. Beneath it, a decomposing torso. Human remains were found hidden throughout the apartment, even in the walls and attic. The fire damage only added to the disturbing scene. With each new body removed, a crowd gathered around the police car where Fritz sat. The horrifying discovery continued until the fourth and final body was retrieved. Fritz was taken in for questioning, and soon his face was on the front page of every newspaper in the country. The coroner confirmed all the victims were women. Their clothes were also found, one set for each body. The pattern was unmistakable, and the evidence piled up. Still, Fritz claimed to know nothing. The coroner reconstructed the victims, but noticed some body parts were missing. Then the detectives realized this wasn't the first time those same body parts had been found. Those remains were eventually identified as belonging to Gertrude Breuer, a 42-year-old woman. Some of the parts had already been found back in 1971, everything except the torso and one leg. She had worked at the Golden Glove Bar, offering her services to clients. In December 1970, one of those clients was Fritz. They went back to his apartment, but for unknown reasons, Gertrude refused to continue. Enraged by yet another rejection, Fritz strangled her to death. That was his first murder. Using saws, knives, and hammers, he dismembered her. He kept the torso and leg in his apartment and dumped the rest in nearby locations. Keeping trophies is common among serial killers, but usually it's clothing, photos, or jewelry, not body parts. Police already knew he was guilty, but needed to identify the other 3 women. Identifying the victims was a challenge, but with photos, clothes, and tips from locals, the police narrowed down the list. This list was reduced to 3 likely victims, and detectives returned to Fritz, this time with photos. After hours of interrogation, he confessed to bringing those women to his apartment. Some stayed for days, others for weeks. This helped investigators place the victims at the crime scene. When asked if he killed them, Fritz claimed he couldn't remember. He admitted to sleeping next to one of them and waking up to find her dead. He insisted he didn't know how it happened. Still, the police were able to confirm their identities. Anna Buchel, 54 years old, the cat-loving widow. Ruth Schult, 52, the bakery worker whose family never stopped searching. And Frieda Roblick, 57, who'd lost her home to alcoholism. These women, poor, aging, and invisible to society, were easy targets for a man who craved control. Their disappearances barely made the news until the fire exposed the truth. Due to decomposition and dismemberment, the exact cause of death could not be determined, and since Fritz remained silent, the truth may never be known. Unlike other killers, Fritz's attacks were completely disorganized and chaotic. He attempted to dispose of the bodies in various ways, while still denying he killed them. They were dismembered and hidden in walls, only for new victims to be invited in and meet the same fate. Investigators believe the murders were triggered by rejection or humiliation during sex. These deaths appeared not to be premeditated, but the impulsive acts of a deeply disturbed man. There was no stalking, no victim selection. These women were lured by promises of shelter and money, and at the first sign of rejection, their bodies ended up in the walls. Over 5 years, he murdered 4 women, yet never fully confessed to the killings. Fritz Honka stood trial in November 1976. Initially, he confessed to the dismemberments, but later recanted and pleaded not guilty. His defense strategy was, at best, bizarre. He told the judge that he had received written instructions to kill from Jack the Ripper himself. These fictional letters, of course, didn't exist. The reference to Jack the Ripper, perhaps the most infamous serial killer, was so absurd it hinted at serious mental illness. A team of psychiatrists diagnosed him with an unspecified condition, that diminished his criminal responsibility. On December 20th, 1976, Fritz Honka was found guilty of 1 count of intentional homicide and 3 counts of involuntary manslaughter. It was determined the last 3 deaths had occurred accidentally through recklessness or negligence. He was sentenced to 15 years in a secure psychiatric facility. Fritz was released in 1993. He changed his name to Peter Jensen and spent the remainder of his life in a care home under medical supervision. Fritz Honka died in 1998, taking his darkest secrets to the grave. But one question lingers: how many victims were never found? And how many killers like him are still hiding behind ordinary faces? Please consider subscribing, hitting the like button, and let us know in the comments which forgotten victims or overlooked stories deserve to be told next.